Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tim Bull. I want to thank the Greater Lakes Association of Realtors for having me here today. We're going to talk today a little bit about some customer service enhancements that they're working on this proposal, and I think particularly relevant to you in your industry. And I'd like to get your feedback on, if there's any changes, there are pros and there are cons, and so I'd like to get your feedback on whether or not this is something that we should be pursuing. You guys all know, I think, in your industry pretty well, there's some related offices of county government that you got to work with pretty regularly when you're in the real estate business. The county auditor treasurer's office that's handling the property taxes, the recorder's office that's handling the recording of deeds at the time of closing and that sort of thing. The assessor's office for property valuation and classification and environmental services if you want to make some improvements to your land. So I want to give you some scenarios of what that experience, what your current experience is, and I suspect maybe some of you can relate to this experience. If you're a customer and you come to Crow Wing County today, and what you want to do is you want to buy a piece of property, and because you're going to live there, you're going to homestead it, and it's a little bit small for your family, so you want to build an addition onto that property. Not that unusual of a circumstance, right? This is what you got to do right now. First, you got to go to the county recorder's office to get that deed recorded. And they're going to look at it first just to see if it's recordable. Once they say, yes, it's recordable, then you got to go to the auditor treasurer's office. It used to be that you had to go to the auditor's office to have the deed tax calculated and the treasurer's office to pay the deed tax, but we did combine those two. So now you just got to go to the auditor treasurer's office to have the deed tax calculated and recorded. Then you go back to the county recorder's office where we're actually going to do the recording. Then you got to go to the property valuation classification office because you have to fill out your homestead application. And finally, just one more stop, you got to go to environmental services so that you can get your planning and zoning permit. How do you feel now? Feeling good? We like you guys a lot. We like you a lot, but I'm not sure you really want to see us that much. How should it be? How about you come to our land services counter and we'll figure this all out? We'll handle the paperwork behind the scenes. Come to one counter, one stop, one stop. We think this is a better way of doing it. Imagine the process improvement if we don't have to send the papers to so many different places. So it's not just that it's better for you as the customer. We believe it's also cheaper, that we can do this cheaper and better. Here's another example. This is an example of somebody who is filing an affidavit of survivorship. You guys probably know a little bit more about that than most people, but it's when a husband and wife, let's say, are on the deed and one of the spouses passes away, and the remaining spouse wants to, say, refinance their mortgage. So they have to file an affidavit of survivorship to get the one spouse's name removed from the mortgage. And right now, if you're going to do that with Crow Wing County, you got to go to 2 offices, 3 stops, 2 offices, 3 stops. How should that be? Should be simple. How about you come to one counter and we figure this out for you? This is an example of a customer who wants to purchase tax forfeited property. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the whole process, but what I can tell you is land services, auditor treasurer, county recorder, and auditor treasurer. So it's 6 stops. What was that, 3, 4 offices? 6 stops, 3 or 4 offices. How ought it be? We're starting to see, I think, a trend here. That what we're trying to create for you is a better customer experience. Here's an example of people coming in, and you run into this all the time, I'm sure, in your applications. Somebody's asking about their property taxes, and then they ask, well, okay, well, how's my valuation compared to somebody else? Well, the property tax information is in the auditor treasurer's office. The valuation information is in the property valuation and classification office. How many times are you going to bounce back and forth between those 2 offices getting the questions answered? How about if we could do that all 3 in one place? Now, you got to ask yourself, why in the world is county government organized in such a silly way? Why don't we do that? Well, what it really boils down to is when you write job descriptions into the stone of statute, then this is what you end up with. And by that I mean we have certain offices that have historically been elected. Our auditor treasurer's office, our recorder's office, where their duties are carved into law. This duty must be done by the county recorder. This duty must be done by the county auditor treasurer. You're creating job descriptions in the stone of statute. And it doesn't allow us to be very flexible. Let me give you an example of just how insane that is. Right now, today, the affidavit of survivorship or the filing of the mortgage or the deed if the recorder said to themselves, you know, I can figure out the mortgage registration tax, I can take care of that for you, I collect fees for other things at the county recorder's office, I will take care of that for you. One stop. Under current state law, the county recorder would not only be guilty of a misdemeanor, but they could be subject to prosecution under law and go to jail for having done that service for you. This is what you get when you carve.
Is that right? They put everybody come to jail for earning them?
That's a whole different, that's a
Why
whole
is
different
it
set of
so
statutes.
bad?
That's a whole different set of, that's a whole different presentation. Okay, so what we're basically saying is that we think we can reorganize county government. And right now, we have organized around our largest organizational priorities: community services, protecting those most vulnerable in our society; transportation services, a safe and effective transportation infrastructure; environmental services and land records should be in land services; and internal services are those things that support the organization: facilities, IT, those internal kinds of services. What are the steps that would be necessary for us to make this service improvement? It does involve a trade-off, and that's what I'm here today about. So asking you, is the trade-off worth it? No is an acceptable answer. You'd have to take these elected offices and you'd have to give the county board the authority to change who's going to perform which function. Who's going to get assigned the tasks? And put it under the county board's authority and say, you still got to get all the tasks done. You're still accountable to all of the requirements in statute, but when and how it gets done, we'll leave it up to you. So it would mean eliminating the offices of the elected county recorder and the elected county auditor treasurer. What are the impacts of doing that? Not just on the customer experience, but because we believe that we can do this not just cheaper but better. But I can tell you today that I'm standing here today telling you I'm committing that this will save $250,000 each and every year. It's not just better service, but it's cheaper service. That's not filling some open positions that we have in place right now, and the process improvements that are associated with handling documents less. This is basic Six Sigma kind of work that the private sector does all the time. We ought to be doing that too. Conservatively, I would tell you, I'm guaranteeing the county board that that's $250,000. And I can hear some folks in the audience already saying, oh, you know, we hear that from the government an awful lot. You're going to save money, right? Crow Wing County is the only county in the last 25 years that has cut its property tax levy every single year for the last 5 years. You can't find another county in the state of Minnesota who's done that. I'm going to go so far as to speculate that you can't find a county in Minnesota history that's done that. And so when we say we're going to do something, we mean what we say. $250,000 a year. 4 years, that's $1 million. 8 years, that's $2 million. We're talking real money. I actually believe that the actual savings is probably closer to somewhere around $400,000. But I got to see the process changes first before I would commit to that higher number. $250,000, and then we would do some of the changes. It does vest broader oversight role in the county board. Here are some facts about this change. 33 counties in Minnesota have already done that. That represents 75% of the state's population. In other words, 75% of the people in Minnesota already live in a county that is organized without an elected auditor, treasurer, and recorder. We're going to stand here and tell you about that's not. I'm not. Others have done this. 5 counties received the same authorization last year, the last legislative session. So as a trend, that's a pretty current trend. If passed, the legislation would still require the county board to pass a resolution to enact it. It would still require them to publish a notice of a public hearing, hold a community conversation with folks and say, like this, I come to you and say, what do you think? Tell us if it's a bad idea or a good idea. But they got to hold a public hearing to do that. If they decide to enact it, they still have to do so with a super majority, 4 out of 5 county board members, normally a simple majority, 3 out of 5, that's what we do. In this case, 4 out of 5. And if the voters, just 10% of the voters from the last election, if the board were to enact this change, felt like it shouldn't be done, then they can file a petition and it gets put on the ballot. So there's lots of community conversation here, and I think proper protections for the public in making sure that what happens is what they want to have happen. So this is the ask. This is the ask that I gave to the county board back in January, to pass a resolution asking our legislators to support that authority. That process is going on right now. In terms of the estimated timelines, if we're going to do this, legislative session runs through about May. Then there's all the processes for the notices, the public hearings, the reverse referendum. That's going to take most of the summer into the early fall. Then the actual restructuring, if we're going to do that, we're going to move big desks and things of that sort. So what's the earliest? As the timeline that we're currently marching on, that this would occur is probably around the first of the year. We're probably looking at 2016 savings. And full year impact. So here's my question.